Bro, if you were one of the 2 people that I've heard this season saying that there's just too much talking, too much wandering around, and exploration, you know, the things that Made in Abyss does perfectly, and just not enough crazy chase scenes, crazy action, and giant kaijus battling each other, then hopefully by the end of this episode you got your fill, because goddamn, on a dime, they just released one of the most action-packed and thrilling sequences that Made in Abyss has ever gotten. Hello everybody, I am Phenom Sage, and welcome back to another Made in Abyss Season 2, The Golden City of the Scorching Sun episode review. Today we will be talking about Episode 6, The Luring. And we finally made it, guys. It's been a long time coming, but I told you at the beginning of this season that I had read the manga for this arc up to a certain point, and with this episode we have finally reached that point by the end of The Luring. The final scene of this episode with Riko and Vueko and just everything left to come in this second season, I am completely blind on. And it has been a while since I actually read those chapters, so honestly, I might as well have been blind on a lot of the other episodes this season. But hey, at least now there's nothing stopping my brain from coming up with the dumbest and most incorrect theories possible. And speaking of the manga, that's really where I want to start with this week's episode. And what I mean by that is that when I read this whole luring section in the manga, I remember specifically not really being too hot on it. And keep in mind, this is while being caught up, so this was basically months and months of waiting for a new chapter, only to end up getting caught in this kaiju battle that at the time honestly felt pretty out of place and unnecessary, when I really just wanted to get back to the stuff that had already been set up over the arc. The Nanachi stuff, the Faputa stuff, things with actual narrative importance to the story, not just a giant battle with admittedly pretty awesome art. However, like a lot of aspects in this arc now, the anime adaptation has just elevated this material so much, and the week-to-week schedule really helps the pacing in a way that the manga suffered for. And because of all of that, I really loved this episode. I loved it just as this crazy action spectacle in the midst of generally more subdued and methodical mystery and character building. The animation went hard, Kevin Penkin's soundtrack is really stepping up where it counts, the chase was thrilling, all of the battles and Reg's transformation were just so goddamn cool. It's just the perfect detour in the middle of this arc that really helps spice things up. Is it still a little out of place? Does it still not really have much point in the grand scheme of this storyline? Sure, but it's just so goddamn cool that I really don't care at this point. On top of all the battles and action though, what I really loved about this episode and about that fight and action was how perfectly it encapsulated what I think are the things that I love most about Riko's character, and that is just her intelligence, man. Like I was saying last week, the series really has 2 sides to Riko's character. You have the kind of naive and ignorant bumbling child side of her, which I have to be honest, I'm not really too fond of. I think that side of her is what makes her my least favorite out of the main trio. But at the same time, you also just have this master strategist and observer of the abyss lying inside of her. And I love the parts of the series where she's able to just really flex that. She's able to show why she's made it this far. She hasn't just been carried by Reg and Nanachi this entire time. Riko is, in reality, really goddamn smart, and in this episode we see not only her intelligence and her strategy, but we also see how well she's able to think on her feet. She's able to come up with these very rational and smart solutions to problems, even in situations and environments that she's never been in before. So just in general, I loved that about this episode. I love seeing Riko being given things to do that showcase her intelligence, and this week's episode did that really well. Plus, it's awesome finally seeing Riko as a genuine white whistle now. Before, she did have the stone, but now that she's properly using it, she's using it with Reg, powering him up, likely in some other ways later down the line as well. this is where she has truly earned that position of White Whistle, in my opinion. Now, unlike the last few weeks of episodes, there's not really a whole lot of actual theory crafting and mysteries to delve into this week. It was mostly just a ton of really great and exciting action, but there were still some details here and there that stood out to me in a way that I found pretty interesting, and pretty much all of them reside at the end for what I assume they're setting up for next week's episode. In the final scene after Reg's badass transformation, Vueko is ready to tell us everything about what we now know is called the Suicide Squad Ganja. And again, almost all of this is probably going to be addressed next week, so I won't get too deep into it here, but the most important thing that stood out to me is the mention of a new character or just being called Irumyuui. And them choosing the hardest names to pronounce aside, Vueko talks about this Irumyuui in a very loving and compassionate way, and she says some interesting things about them that makes me wonder who or what they actually are. She asks if Irumyuui sent Rico and the gang down here. She talks about their memories and desires and existence, and all of this is happening while zooming in on this heart-like thing that we can see has Vueko's old star compass at the center of it. And I'm just gonna cut to the chase now and say what I think is going on here. I think Irumyuui is the village itself. Now, I have said in the past that the village has constantly been foreshadowed and alluded to as being actually alive, something that has a consciousness of its own that allows it to see into the souls of everything within it. And this is a theory that I'm pretty confident in just because it explains a lot of things that have been going on in the series so far. It explains why the effects of the Abyss don't apply in this location. It explains what Vueko is talking about by the end of this episode. It foreshadows what might have occurred to lead to the creation of this village. And just the village's name is literally called Iruburu, a name that is even harder for me to say. All of that is what leads me to this assumption, but I will actually go one step further and add on to this theory in what is likely not actually true and not actually the case, but I was thinking about it this episode, so I figured I would mention it. I think Irumyuui is the name of the outcast girl who was with them in the flashback. I think something happened in that flashback where the girl ended up being sacrificed or transformed into this village, and Faputa was also born from that. I know that probably sounds like nonsense. There's a lot of things pointing against that, like the fact that why would there be two transformations or two things born from just the one girl? Why would her name be Irumyuui if nobody else's names have changed after their transformation? A bunch of stuff that isn't quite lining up the right way, but at the same time, it just feels like that has to be the case, because who else would Vueko talk about in that way? And why in this episode would Vueko say that she's never met Faputa if she's clearly been acquainted with that girl in the past? Is it a different character? Am I crazy? Am I going to look like an idiot when Irumyuui just turns out to be a completely new character? Probably yes, but I thought I would throw this theory out there now for all of you to laugh at. Otherwise, there's just a lot of cool and interesting things being set up for the future. I imagine once we get this flashback sequence, we will find out what Faputa really wants, why she wants Reg, and maybe even learn a little more about Reg's origins through osmosis. But again, not much to go off right now. I'm kind of overly implying things through very small details, but hey, that's what I do, whether they turn out right or whether they turn out horribly wrong. And speaking of that, last week I made some comments and questions about Bondrewd going to the 6th layer, going to this hollow village, and how that really didn't make sense to me, because what the hell? I thought the whole point of him wanting to become a hollow was so that he could freely explore the abyss with no limitations. How is he getting back from here back to Edofront? And it turns out that I have actually been operating under a horribly wrong assumption about Nanachi's blessing and what it means for the curse. I don't think they ever explicitly state this anywhere in the series, otherwise I'm pretty sure I would have remembered it, but on the Discord we were discussing this, and it turns out there is exactly one instance in the manga during the Bondrewd arc where you can see that Nanachi is still susceptible to the curse. She is not immune just because she's a hollow and just because she has a blessing. I thought that was the case, but I guess it's more that she's just able to see the curse and can avoid it in some instances. However, this still doesn't explain to me why Bondrewd is able to casually go down into the 6th layer as much as he wants, with his praying hands beside him no less, because in the Bondrewd arc, we very clearly see that Bondrewd and the praying hands are susceptible to the curse as well. So how does he get down here and back up with all of the relics that he wants to get here? What is the meaning of all this? Again, I think it's just something that you have to go with, but if you do know, let me know in the comments or in the Discord server below. That's been all from me for this week's episode though, a very action-packed, very thrilling episode that I enjoyed a lot, but I just can't wait for next week when we finally start getting some answers for all of the questions that have been stacking up over the season. Join the previously mentioned Discord server in the description below. I hope you are having a great day, and I will see you in the next video.